Good evening, Mom. My name is the servant to the late Queen. No, it's not really. It's Pete from Paranormal Blip here. How you doing? Huh? Anyway, this is episode 60, and I'm absolutely delighted to give you a blockbuster, give it to you, a blockbuster interview with Matt Laslo. We talk about the upcoming heroes, as you can imagine. Heroes? I said heroes. The upcoming hearings, and we talk about the media as well, which is a kind of ongoing concern for me, the media, and getting the old UAP story in the media. That'd be helpful, wouldn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And also, now, so most of the episode is dedicated to my interview with Matt, but also we have got an absolutely extraordinary bit of the old footage. It's audio from this YouTube video that was doing the rounds earlier today. And it's old Sir David Attenborough, nevertheless, the person that I nominate to be the one who tells the world about UAPs, about NHIs, non-human intelligences. I think if it was coming from him, we'd all kind of settle down in seconds, wouldn't we? Yeah. But he, in this, oddly enough, this was, I think this was about 10 years ago. I think I'm right in saying that the YouTube video dates it to 2013, which is exactly 10 years ago. And he's in conversation with Joe. No, what's his name? Not Joe Cocker. Jarvis Cocker. Joe's son, Jarvis Cocker from Pulp. I was talking about Pulp the other day. Do you remember that? Yeah. I quite like Pulp. And Jarvis is, a very good dude, isn't he? I love Jarvis. And anyway, he's talking to. It looks like he's interviewed your man. What's his name? Old Richard Attenborough, and Richard Attenborough's brother. And Richard Attenborough's brother says, any audience questions? I suppose this is how it happens, although I'm just making it up. And anyway, somebody in the audience does ask a question. He says, what is the kind of holy grail of natural history camera people? If you were to film something hidden, what's the kind of golden bullet for getting something on film that hasn't been filmed yet? And surprisingly enough, old Richard Attenborough's brother said the Orang Pendek. No, he didn't quite say the Orang Pendek, but he did say the Abominable Snowman. And Jarvis says, "Oh, you're the Yeti. Are you saying there might be something in the Yeti?" And so he does. Old David Attenborough thinks that there might be something in the Yeti. Isn't that extraordinary? So the info that he gives is quite up. It's like basically anecdotal, but he does talk about these photographs taken by this guy in the Himalayas, and way high up in the Himalayas, and it does seem absolutely extraordinary. So this is a guy that took these photos, a guy called Eric Shipton in 1951, and I'm looking at one of them now. And what I'll do is I'll put a little link into the a site called Curious Archive, an esoteric guide to our strange world. That's good, because it is the archive section in today's podcast, which we're bringing the archive back, for kind of long-term listeners. You may remember that. So it is kind of incredible that, we've got this very convincing, a kind of series of photographs. Dear Mick, this is a letter that I've just found from. Anyway, let's read it. We'll try and work out what it is, right? Dear Mick, here are the footprint photos. Sorry for the delay. We came across them on a high pass on the Nepal-Tibet watershed during the 1951 Everest expedition. They seem to have come over a secondary pass at about 19,500 foot, down to 19,000 foot where we first saw them, and then went on down the glacier. We followed them for the better part of a mile. Jesus Christ. It doesn't say Jesus Christ in the letter. That's my actual surprise. So it wasn't just a couple that they saw. Do you know what I mean? Like a mile worth of footprints. What it is, I don't know. But I'm quite clear that it is no animal known to live in the Himalaya and that it is big. Compare the depths to which it and Mike Ward, no featherweight, have broken into the snow. Yours, Tom Bordelon. Tom Bordelon sounds like a character from Harry Potter. So, quite interesting. And then you've got some... Hold on a sec. This is quite interesting now because Michael Ward, is that the guy that wrote the letter? Who's Michael Ward? I don't know who Michael Ward is. But anyway, you can read the article to find out who Michael Ward is. But basically, this is quite extraordinary that there's a photograph. Oh, okay. So Michael Ward has written a book, The Yeti Footprints, Myth and Reality. Yeah, no, it's not a book. It's an article in Alpine Journey. And so he's come up with a theory, and there's quite a shocking photograph of somebody with deformed feet. God, I wish there was a bit of a spoiler alert before. I will provide the spoiler alert. If you don't want to see deformed feet, then don't go to the link. There may be some people listening who actually want to see the deformed feet, especially, and you're thinking, God, I'm sick and tired of UAP and David Grush. When are you going to talk about deformed feet? Well, today's your lucky day. And so I need to get to the bottom of this. So I'm going to read this now from Michael Ward. Most of the prints have been seen by mountaineers, the majority of whom are laymen, and the explanations have been provided by anthropologists and others who have assumed that the prints were made by normal feet. None has ever considered that the Malung prints or other could be made by a local Tibetan with abnormally shaped feet. In a primitive community, I'm not sure that we kind of used that language in 1999. I definitely wasn't using that language in 1999. So get with the picture, Michael. Come on, use, language sensitive to the absolutely extraordinary experience and sophistication of all cultures. Please, Michael, tell him off. You've got to call it out when you see it, though, don't you? In a primitive community, many days and miles from even the most basic medical facilities and quite beyond the reach of surgery, abnormality of the foot would remain from birth onwards. Even in civilized communities, abnormally shaped feet. Civilized is in exclamation marks. At least he's put the exclamation marks. But you know what's better than exclamation marks? Not using the word civilized, even in 1999. He's not getting any brownie points for me for putting the exclamation points. And I do realize that it was written in 1999. But even so, we do not talk about cultures in this way. Thank you. Even in 1999. Anyway, civilized communities, abnormally shaped feet are not uncommon. And many do not prevent walking. Hold on a minute. So this is, okay, that's a bit of a, anyway. So I wonder what old Attenborough would say about that. But nevertheless, then Attenborough then goes on to say something else as well. But I'll give you the audio so you can listen to Attenborough and get off that foot website. So before we go into Laslo, just a quick word about the YouTube video service. On Paranormal Blip, I've just put on a couple of the video versions of the interviews that I did with Daz Smith, 2 from J. Christopher King, James Yandoli, Kelly Chase, and Daniel, also known as Omega Point. So they're past episodes. You probably know the episodes and have heard the episodes. But if you're looking for, the actual footage, then jump over to Paranormal Blip podcast on YouTube. And while you're there, follow the old thingy, click subscribe. And while you're there, click subscribe on Apple, on Spotify. And if you're interested in more subscribing, then subscribe on Spotify. Exclusive content, 10 episodes at the moment, subscriber episodes. And while you're there, check out the ones that I did speak to people, but I didn't film them. So, like, for instance, Graham Randall, fantastic interview with Graham, and a couple of the old experience interviews as well, which was really good. My friend Dan, and with somebody else whose name I can't remember the pseudonym we gave her. So, but that's a very good one, isn't it? Interview with a paranormal experiencer. I think it's called that. Anyway, so nice little bit there. And also Twitter, follow me on Twitter at Paranormal Blip, and Instagram, which I ignore, so don't bother following me there. But it is Paranormal Blip, all the links are in the episode description. So it is my absolute pleasure to invite Matt Laslo onto Paranormal Blip. And Matt, hello, how are you?
I still got my pulse.
That's a good answer. But Matt, you're obviously, the kind of the man of the moment in UAP world at the moment. And I obviously we're going to talk about, the latest in terms of the suspected, or people kind of think and basically certainly know that, or expect, that's the word I'm looking for, expect for various hearings to take place soon. So we'll talk about that. But also, Matt, you are a journalist and you teach journalism. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to, or me, on behalf of the audience, to kind of quiz you about where you think we're at in terms of the media reporting on UAPs, and also maybe as well advising my audience how you think we can get journalists interested in this story. So I don't know how that sits with you, Matt, but what do you think? Should we go for it?
Oh yeah. Well, I would say if you all in the community get more people like David Grush, then yep, that's going to force the quote unquote mainstream media to really take it more seriously. As a Wired magazine contributor, this got on my radar dating back to the start of this year, which feels like ages ago, but with the Chinese spy balloon incidents here in the US. When this happened, the entire American Congress was focused on it, which the media, to one degree or another, follows what they're doing. Or no, we follow the shiny, chic object of the day. And so then it happened to be the balloons. What was interesting at the end of that is, if you remember, the Air Force then shot down 3 or 4 UAPs, and then it stopped. It felt, at least here from U.S. soil, kind of felt like, wait, are there now going to be regular Air Force, shooting down of these unidentified objects, which is very unsettling, with that one balloon traversing the entire, going from basically Alaska to our east in Carolina. That unsettled a lot of Americans because we were like, wait, um, we spend about $1 trillion a year on all these fancy defense toys and offensive toys. And you guys don't even know if a balloon is coming over. But then you also, right? But then you also don't know these other objects, and you're actually telling us you don't even know what you shot down. And so I think whether that was federal government ineptitude or whatever else, that really focused Congress in a way that we haven't seen, and that really momentarily studied the media on it. And then what happened? We almost defaulted on our debt. Donald Trump farted. Biden left some classified documents in his garage. The media is so distracted by the newest thing. Oh, then the submersible was lost looking for the Titanic. And so, yeah, that's where the U.S. media, I guess, much like the British media, very schizophrenic. But once we had this whistleblower come out, the claims that he made, one about recovered crafts, that one woke some people up, especially because as the vice chair of the Senate Intel Committee, Marco Rubio, senator from Florida, as he told me on our askapol.com, the reason this stands out is because there's been a lot of people done this before. But he's like, this is regular. He goes, what stands out is this was vetted by the inspector general, deemed as credible, and then sent to us. And he's been in the Senate more than a decade on the Intelligence Committee. A lot of that time, he's like, that means we have to, as Congress, take this seriously. That rises above anything we've seen in the past. But then the whistleblower's second claim that should have woken all 535 the comes up is his claim is that there are these hidden SAPs or special access programs that the federal government has hidden from you, Congress. And so that one, especially again, because the inspector general sent it to them, that woke everyone up and kind of made, well, because we could see how serious the looks on lawmakers' faces were when it came out. And so that becomes a little settling. So a few of us who cover and all that, it just sent our radars up.
Yeah. So you sense the difference then. You go to the Senate. This is the place where you're kind of based. You're there talking to people, and you sense with you and your fellow reporters, you sensed that it did actually shake things up.
Well, so here's the interesting thing. Yes and no. Once, what was it? The day after the whistleblower came out, I forget who the reporter was, and I actually didn't even know him, but there was two different reporters who at the start of the congressional week, instead of having fun prime minister's questions, I guess that's midweek, but I love me some good public. So instead of that, the start of the U.S. Congress week, what we have is, especially in the House, all the Republicans will meet in one room, all the Dems in one room, and then later that morning, the Dem leadership team will come out and address the press corps, and then the Republicans go. Well, so my ears really perked up. I'd already covered the initial leak or the allegations from the whistleblower. I'd covered that for Wired, but after, I don't know, I hadn't yet. Yeah, pardon me. I hadn't yet. But I started hearing two different reporters ask, first the Democratic leadership, then the Republican leadership, about this whistleblower. And it was already on my list of things to ask them about. But then hearing it inside the press conference, you heard the laughter And so first it was Democratic leader. He's lower on the food chain, so many people know him, but Pete Aguilar, congressman, a Democrat from California, but he kind of laughed off, not up on that. Republicans, it was Steve Scalise. He just said, well, yeah, he didn't quite understand it, but he was like, yeah, there's a lot of things this administration's hid from us. So he just took it as your normal, everyday partisan question. So that's when I got curious, talked to some of the members who were leaving the press conference, but then I started looking for people on the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committees. And that's when it's been really interesting, because there's a lot of chatter about it. This is not what the mainstream or whatever press corps is covering. There's a handful of people pulling the threads. But when you bring it up to lawmakers, they're taking it seriously. Again, that first and the second claim. The first claim, recovered craft. Second claim, the government is lying to Congress, or the federal government, the executive branch, is lying to you, Congress, and hiding something or some of these SAPs, special access programs for you. That one, lawmakers are taking a lot more serious than the American Press Corps.
Yeah. And so following on from that, then we are expecting hearings, public hearings. And I think Tim Burchett was hoping for that to be before Congress breaks up for the summer, later this month.
Yeah, and so the shame about the American Congress is they vacation a lot more than the American people, who don't even get paid holidays. And so right now, Congress is on a 2-week July 4th, American Independence Day recess. So I won't even get to talk to lawmakers until next Monday at the earliest. And then they're only here about 3 or 4 weeks until they take off for the August recess, which is a shame, because they're going to have a ton of stuff on their plate. Funding the American government, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And then, because they'll have to have it funded by September, so you don't want a deal or know what the contours are when they leave for August. Sometimes there's chatter that, they might have to cancel their vacations. No, lawmakers not cancel their vacations. So it just means that everything else kind of gets pushed way to the back burner. And so Burchett and Congresswoman Luna from Florida, they're kind of heading up the investigation of the House with a House Oversight Committee. The interesting thing, some other news I last week, was not only that Burchett wants to have these hearings. He's saying there's going to be one hearing. It's got to be their main one. They've got to get it right in the House. He wants that before August recess. With the oversight chair, told me, James Comer, he said, well, there's witnesses, so we don't know if it's 2, 3, or whatever, how high it goes. But he said more than one witness has failed his oversight committee's own investigation into, just vetting them for political reasons, but they failed that. And if you listen to the audio, which is up on askapoll.com, listen to his voice. I've covered Congress for NPR stations for 17 years now. Listen to his voice. What he's saying is he's astounded, and he's also a little bit embarrassed. You can feel his cheeks getting red, and not because of his Irish ancestry. Those cheeks are getting red because he's embarrassed. And so as people pointed out online, it's political question. He failed the political background check, or pardon me, this 2 or more people failed this political background check. But So there's partisan politics at play, but House Oversight Chair James Comer has had probably the most partisan committee within the House, and he's been on it and rabid partisans for whichever purpose it's been. And he's astounded that at least two of these witnesses didn't pass their test. So I'm curious, once they get back in a week, my question is going to be, hey, have those delays, have those witnesses not getting congressional muster, does that actually delay Burchett's timeline? And is this going to get pushed till after August? Again, if that happens, I feel Burchett and others feel like that would take some momentum away from them. But we'll see. It's Congress.
Yeah.
I gave up trying to predict politicians years ago.
Yeah, sure. So Comer's saying that people haven't, well, you put it, I've got your ask a poll, you know, article about this here with the kind of, you know, readout of the interview, and you say so they're not passing the smell test, and so what may, is it just that for whatever reason they want to kind of have rock solid, you know, as ironclad, you know, reputable witnesses, so they basically just can't be kind of torn down if they give extraordinary evidence in public? Is that basically the reason? And so some of us, you know, might not be look too good if our pasts are kind of breakthrough. Is that what's happening?
Mine would look terrible. Like, I used to be a cokehead before I studied to be a pastor. Like, oh, I'm gonna apostate on many.
Yeah.
This one, it's interesting because yes, hyperpartisan politics, but this just doesn't happen. So again, I've been here covering Congress 17 years, and I can't remember. Like, I remember them bringing in all these Major League Baseball players with these huge arms who lied to their faces and said, "No, we didn't do steroids."
Right.
You know, so this Congress has brought in plenty of disreputable folks in the recent past. And so what Comer did tell me is, he said there's this trick we play on the oversight committee, whether, you know, especially when you're in the minority. So he's kind of admitting, like, hey, we did this when we were in the minority, but it's kind of actually a smart trick. First thing you do when you get the witness list from the other side is, oh, you do quick background check. You know, you've been yourselves. And so what he said is this, and he didn't say the word political, but it sounded like he was saying, hey, the political smell test. Now he gave two examples. One was, you know, they might have something that they did, they were accused of racism in their past. That was one. And then he said, or, you know, they have a felony. So those are two examples. Now, this is America. We've incarcerated more people than any other nation in the globe. So there's a lot of felonies over here. So I really run the gamut. So again, I have follow-up questions on that, but yeah, it's astounding news.
So that may delay things in terms of Burchett's kind of timetable for this.
It could, because what Comer was telling me is it was basically, these are witnesses Burchett and Congresswoman Luna wanted to hear from, but they didn't pass our tests, so now we have to replace them. And what I've been learning is, it seems like the House investigation is broader than what, especially Senator Kirsten Gillibrand from New York, her investigation, along with other senators, seems to be a little bit more narrow and confined to the whistleblower. David Grush's um, allegations. And so it's very unclear whether the witnesses who didn't pass the smell test in the House Oversight Committee, it's unclear whether they are the same witnesses that Gillibrand wanted to hear from. Um, Again, they're lazy. I haven't had access, but I've got a long list of questions when they come back.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose that the focus for the last couple of weeks has been on the oversight committee. Is Gillibrand slightly on the back burner? Is it, or you don't expect that in the next couple of weeks?
Well, she would like it sooner than later, and so she's House, or me, she's Senate Armed Services Committee,
Yeah,
and so also, so what in the UK that would be the House of Lords. So the House of Lords, they move a little slower,
yeah,
kind of at their own pace. And so the house here, it's our rowdy, rabid, fun to cringeworthy chamber, which is actually where a lot of people who follow the UAP issue, a handful were like, wait, it's good that Comer and his committee are taking this seriously and, doing a serious vetting of these whistleblowers, and especially people who corroborate the whistleblower,
yeah,
because I think they know that, if you get one thing wrong, especially in this PR war of an era we're in where lawmakers aren't battling over policy, they're just battling over pop politics and, winning CNN that night.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, totally.
and so we'll see again for Chet and Misna seem to be going on a different track than the Senate, which many people who are close to the issue say is actually kind of a good thing. Um, I put my hand in a hornet's nest with my first Wired magazine piece on the issue, because I put the whole UAP debate and UFO debate within the context of what is widely seen as a conspiratorial Congress. Um, and so when you go up to the 10,000-foot view, the Senate investigation does have a lot more credibility off just right off the bat than the House one does. But again, that gets into more of the partisan politics and even just not even partisan, but the minority versus majority politics. Because another exclusive I dropped last week on askapol.com was to the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. His name is Jim Himes, congressman from Connecticut. He says he's very dubious because 2 years ago, when they had these experts in from Aero and from the Pentagon,
Mhm.
what they told Himes is, and he said he asked them, and I re-listened to it, and he definitely tried to ask them definitively, but we know how government witnesses are with their answers. But Himes says that he was persuaded by, I believe it was Pentagon and NASA, or at least uh, maybe Pentagon, maybe just Pentagon folks, but he was persuaded by them that no, the U.S. does not have recovered craft. Um, he might not, because he's the top Democrat on the House Committee. He might not have any knowledge of what the Republicans are doing, just because that's where the partisanship can come in. But as far as looking for honest answers, right now that's fairly nonpartisan. Um, and I see that holding a lot longer in the Senate, in the House, at the Chamber of Bomb Throwers. So your guess is as good as mine.
Was that Scott Bray and Ron Moultrie? They were the guys that gave the kind of hearing, the
Yep.
public hearing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 22. So, I mean, see, the thing is with all of this, like, there's a part of me that um, Ross Coulthard has been talking in the last couple of days.
Hmm.
Ross is the Australian journalist who interviewed David Grush for the News Nation, television interview, and he's been
Hmm.
talking the last couple of days about how essentially, so David Grush, he, um, was kind of tasked to investigate, and then he kind of found out, that, like, of course, this is all his allegations, but his allegation is that he was tasked to investigate. He did investigate. It took him 4 years for his own kind of get his own sense of, oh, this is actually happening. This isn't, I'm not being fed a web of lies here. This is actually happening. He then started to receive, kind of like bad bad stuff started happening to him because he was investigating and reporting on this stuff for ATIP, which was his job. And then he took that complaint to the ICIG, um, the Intelligence Community Inspector General. And the Intelligence Community Inspector General said, well, yes, you have been mistreated because you were working and you were mistreated in your work, but also, they spoke for 11 hours, according to Rush, and but also what you're saying is credible and urgent, and you need to tell the Senate, Congress. So then he was then sent off to Congress. Grush. So Grush has had these, conversations, probably in skiffs or in, secure settings with the staff, like definitely the
Hmm.
staff for senators and Congress people
Yep.
now. So in a way, there's a kind of, and of course, nobody quite knows who knows what, if you know what I mean. If anyone knows, Matt, but I definitely don't know because I'm not there with my microphone getting interviews with them every day. But
Oh, I don't know. I'm not on the intelligence committee.
but there's a sense of, I mean, not maybe not performance, but there's a sense of, you know, almost like timing, like, how much can we say when, yeah, with these guys that you're talking to, like the lawmakers in the United States, yeah. And I wonder
Well,
whether, like, the one big
uh-huh.
thing that is going to happen if the hearings happen. So, say the oversight committee does hearings, either the end of July or whenever they come back after the summer holidays, they are putting people in a spotlight, exposing them to a global spotlight. Do you know what I mean? And you kind of can't come back from that. So it makes sense for them to really have to think through, who is it that we're going to put up in that position. The interesting thing about David Grush is that, like you say, or you're like, uh, Marco Rubio said to you, he was verified, if you like, by, assessed to be credible and his complaint to be urgent, by the ICIG, So there's a kind of level of authenticity there, if you like. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you
And
think about that?
I was going to say, and I hate the word interesting because it's vanilla and also meaningless, but it's also perfectly nebulous, which makes me love it sometimes. This is one, like, as I asked Senator Gillibrand, she agreed, like, this one's very layered. Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm intrigued with her specifically. And let me start there and then broaden out because she serves on both and this is again Senator Kirsten Gillibrand from New York. She serves on both the Armed Services Committee and she leads up the what is it? Coming threats. There's a name of the subcommittee. You can look it up. But the
Something like
emerging
that.
threats and
Yeah. Yeah.
capabilities subcommittee. And so with that, it's been interesting because she was the one who chaired the Senate's first hearing in decades and decades and decades on this issue. Well, she also serves on the Intelligence Committee. And so I'm always kind of wondering which side of her brain is she speaking from? Because there are things you can say on the Armed Services Committee that you can't say from the Intelligence Committee. So what I've found is going up to people who are only on the Intelligence Committee, a few of them, including its chair, Mark Warner, have really tied themselves in interesting knots, trying to speak about this and then trying to not say what they know. And like someone like Mark Warner, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, I've been in Washington longer than he has, which maybe makes me a bad swamp creature. But so I used to cover him for his local state NPR station, Virginia Public Radio, and then also for Washington, D.C.'s NPR station, WAMU. And so I know him. I've seen him, sleeves rolled up on the campaign trail. I've talked to him on sticky, sweaty, nasty political presidential convention floors. Yeah. And so seeing him be twisted in knots, and even when he was confirming to me that the staff had talked to the whistleblower Grush, he was like, I need to talk to staff to let, because when you're on the Intelligence Committee, for one, you can get put in jail if you divulge classified information. That likely wouldn't happen, but that's the fear. It's also, and especially with people like Warner, Rubio, because they're the chair and the vice chair of the Senate Intel Committee. Well, then you have the House chair and vice chair, or there it's chair and ranking member, but you have those four, the head of the Intel committees, and then you have the majority and minority leader of the Senate. So in this case, Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell. In the House, you have those two leaders, Speaker McCarthy, and then Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. Those eight, they're called the Gang of Eight.
Yeah.
And so there are certain things that they're read in on. Good example would be post 9/11. Post 9/11, a lot of the big meetings had between the Bush White House and Congress say on something like warrantless wiretapping, Section 702, which is a debate we're having again here in the American Congress this year. That one was hidden from most members of Congress, but those eight knew about it. And so there's been a few things where I've even asked other members of the Senate, wait, if Chair Mark Warner knew, he couldn't even tell us.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, yeah, that's right. So those are some of the interesting dynamics at play that you definitely see, like trepidation and fear. Like they don't want to say some things that they know, but it also like leaves this mystery because what do you know? And what aren't you saying? And so some of them have flashed their eyes at me saying something like, oh, I know something that negates something the whistleblower, Mr. Grush, said, but then they can't tell me about it. And so they can't talk about it, but only can flash their expressive eyes, then that's not information to me.
Oh, yeah.
So I report what they do say.
Yeah.
But that's also where I'm intrigued, and I'm going to keep pulling the thread because one thing I'm learning is they've never really been pushed, at least regularly reminded of these issues.
Yeah.
You hear from some, like Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey, he told me, like, oh, hey, I hadn't heard about the whistleblower, but wow, my staff is really into this stuff, and so there's different interesting pockets that are definitely not partisan. They're very nonpartisan.
Yeah.
And so, like, especially in a hyper-partisan Congress, that's why this issue intrigues me so much, because it isn't your normal, you know, she said, he said, and she's blue and he's red,
Yeah, totally.
the
Totally.
American idiocracy.
Yeah. Yeah. One, so that's really interesting. Do you find, like in your reporting of this, and also maybe it's reflected in the bipartisan state of this as an issue? Like, do you think it's a vote winner? And also, do you think it's something that kind of get like, so for instance, your articles on Wired, you write about, a whole series of different things, AI and crypto and whatever else, but also UAPs. Do you get a sense that more people are attracted to UAPs than other subjects that you write about, or less? What's the
Well, so unscientific poll answer to your question. Oh my God, the UAP people are hired up and very well read, because I met a lot of you, and hello. Again, my first Wired piece on it was snarky. Well, it put the issue within the reality of this Congress, which many would say, historically or otherwise, even internally, on both right, left, and center, that this is not a serious Congress. And part of that is because Senate's controlled by Democrats, which is President Joe Biden's party, and
yeah
then you have Speaker McCarthy and Republicans in the House. So this Congress is really just, hey, let's attempt to fund the government, or like not default on the debt. Let's fund the military. Like, they have three priorities basically. It's not break shit, because they're all looking towards 2024, which I think is disgusting. I'm like, American people, we just elected a Congress. Let's make them work for us. But or not, and then we can vote based on that. But no, it's America, so we got 2 year long, or no, 4 year long presidential campaigns now. This is gross.
yeah
Um, but those dynamics do intrigue me, because that could actually give more space to an issue like this for lawmakers to, because what? Abortion, boom, there's going to be no agreement between the left and the right. Oh, gay marriage or whatever, those issues, no, there's not going to be many spots where they come together, etc. All these hot button issues,
yeah yeah yeah
immigration, etc. And
yeah
so that's where this one can be one of those back burner issues, and especially because it is bicameral, cutting across both chambers. It seems like, yeah, but then also coupled with, uh, don't forget, like I said at the beginning, this all started with us allowing China to, as some would say, invade American airspace with wind up balloons, or maybe very fancy balloons, but we don't know yet. Um, so we'll see. That's why I just want to keep putting pressure on all of them. And I think I actually didn't answer your original question.
or just about the kind of popularity of the Wired articles, on
Oh,
UAPs. I mean, by the way,
well, yeah, yeah.
your Wired article is brilliant. It's really, real meaty piece of journalism, and I'll put it in the episode description so people can. I'm sure my listeners have read it, but people can kind of
Great.
grab it. And it's the kind of the
Totally.
a good sense of, like, from an outside. I mean, I do follow American politics, but not closely, really. So you do get a good sense of the shape of you know Congress as it is. Yeah, but so that
Yep.
question of, and do you think it's a vote winner though as well?
Well, So yeah, so that was the question I missed. Thank you for reminding me. I was on another UAP podcast or video cast last week, and I misspoke because I was asked that same question, and I quoted the American people as being 68% in favor of, or now believing UAPs, or that there's life beyond us. I'm wrong. So I apologize, as I did on Twitter. It's actually 65%. So I was 3 high. But after that host asked me, I was like, oh no, because we were live, I believe, or maybe live on tape. But then I went and rechecked it, and that's one of the numbers that really stood out to me from the magazine piece for Wired. 65% of the American public now. And it's interesting. I need to go back to the language, and I'm always dubious of how American polls are done. But what stood out is it seemed like it was the same question that had been asked over decades and years. Because what also stands out in my mind, not having it in front of me, was that there's a huge, massive sea change in the past 3-4 years, or actually 4, 3, and then 2 years, which makes me wonder if it's the smartphone era, which then also, as a magazine contributor, it's a tech reporter, but then I also teach on new media's impact on government. So I'm studying deep fakes and all that. We're also in this new deep fake era. And so this is where I'm just skeptical and curious for a living. Chicken or egg, whether it's my skepticism or cynicism. But that's one that I'm definitely looking out for. Because as of now, I don't think anyone has an idea of whether this really moves the polls, or pardon me, really moves the politicians. Those polls, not the other polls. And so we'll see. They had the hearings into this issue 2 years ago in the last Congress, but it wasn't a focal point of the Congress like it's becoming, even if it's in some niche circles. If your niche circle within the Capitol is the Intelligence Committee, or your niche circle is the Armed Services Committee, those are some niche circles that are pretty high. So the fact that a lot of powerful people in Washington, D.C., actually, the fact that some of the most powerful people, at least on Capitol Hill, if not all of Washington and the nation, the fact that they're taken very seriously, I don't know. I've never seen that before.
Yeah. So maybe as a way into talking about the media generally and the kind of differences, the changes that are happening in the media and your work as a teacher of media, can you tell me about Ask a Poll? This is a Substack that you've recently launched, Matt.
Oh yeah. I thought you were going to preview it a little more, but no.
Dramatically.
That was a good dramatic pause. I was waiting.
Thank you.
Which means I fumbled dramatically.
I await my Oscar in the post.
You're hired.
Yeah, but sorry, I should really ask a question. Well, Ask a Poll. That's a new Substack. Does that help?
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, thank you for spoon feeding me. I need that. We just had our Independence Day celebration yesterday. I'm a little sluggish today.
Oh, I see. Very good.
But so, one of my main lectures I give each year is kind of a history of the media, but with an eye towards the Washington press corps. And it's depressing. I've given it at Cornell, NYU, Johns Hopkins. I give it to senior Air Force officers. ... The data at the end of that lecture, this is PowerPoint I give, is so depressing because it shows that not only in the past few years have people started to not even tune in to the quote unquote, and not even the mainstream media. I'm not talking the cable networks or the entertainment networks, as I call them.
Yeah.
I'm just talking like straight up your local newspaper. It's now about 50% of Americans, and basically Trump and his supporters, some on that side, but also some in the middle. They not only think the media gets it wrong, they think, as about 50% think the media is actively lying to them.
Right.
And that's a number to my core. For it's like, how can I do my job?
Yeah.
And part of me, I've been freelance or independent, or basically my whole nearly 2 decades. That's because I don't want to just talk to people who agree with me. I
Yeah.
like writing for a ton of different publications because, each one has a different audience where I might be able to tell a little bit of a more nuanced story or open their eyes to something, So the fact that the media is not trusted, and for one, let me start with, well, it deserves this. We've gotten a lot of things wrong, and I think we need and parade on social media 24/7. We become the narcissists that we hate in the politicians.
Mm.
And so I think we have a lot of reorienting we have to do, which is why we have to really focus on the reader, which is just average people. And that's where, with Apple.com, Substack, what we're trying to do. And like, I believe tomorrow we're going to drop an immigration page. And then I used to cover cannabis and prison reform and all that for what? Playboy, Rolling Stone, Vice, and Vice News Tonight.
Mm.
So especially all these areas where people are very passionate. So also AI and crypto. So where people are really passionate, but the herd that is the mainstream media, as they're chasing the shiny foil of that night, it's communities like you all who are really cued in. I mean, for one, you guys are experts. And so I'm learning a ton from your community and actually taking what I learned from your community and then going to ask lawyers based upon the feedback I get from you all.
Mm.
So that's why I call it people powered news, but we're the new people powered press corps. Well, that's the thing. Well, here's the hilarious thing about being a contemporary reporter. So, well, reader funded and supported. Well, I've covered Congress for that list I just gave: Rolling Stone, Vice News Tonight, Playboy. So yeah, I've always had corporate money paying me, but I've never known who those people are. There's kind of that beautiful filter built into these publications where, there's that good insulation from the newsroom to the funders. But because I've been diverse, when I was in NPR reporter regularly, I was also a Wired magazine contributor. And so
Yeah.
NPR is funded in part by Twitter, Facebook, and Google. And so, it's just something us in the field never, it doesn't impact us, but it can. And I think as an industry, that would be the number one focus. And so when we're opening the doors to communities who feel like they're underserved when it comes to the news that matters for them, whether it's healthcare, climate change, or curiosities, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, if there's people interested in a topic, that makes me interested in it. Because a lot of the stuff I watch on regular newscasts, I'm not interested in.
Yeah. So you can So basically, with askapol.com, and then obviously the link is in the episode description, Matt. What you do is you join, essentially, you subscribe, and then you can ask. So I'm talking to my listeners here, Matt.
Yep.
Listeners, you subscribe, go to the link, press the button, go to askapol.com, and then type your email in, subscribe, and then you can ask Matt a question, right? So this is the thing about Matt, is that he is there talking to the people that we want to hear from, like, the UAP community. We've got dozens of questions for Rubio, for Gillibrand, for Burchett, and Matt is the guy that can give us the juice on these dudes, and he is giving us the juice on these dudes. But you're absolutely right, Matt. I mean, I'm learning so much. I've been doing this for just over a year, and it's I've learned so much in the last about 18 months or so. I've learned so much in the last 18 months, and there are people in the UAP community, as you know, that have been doing it for 30 years. Do you know what I mean? So the level of detail that they have about a case that happened in 1947 or 1945 or whatever is extraordinary. Like, I mean, it's mind blowing the amount of detail that some people know about UAPs. So, my dedicated audience, if you do have a burning question for Rubio, as an example, get on to askapol.com and get in contact with Matt. So, have I sold your website well enough, Matt?
You're hired.
Hey. But
Teach
genuine,
political communications. So I've taught
that,
PR, and you're hired.
that's for the professional in communication. So, but I mean, it's genuinely, really interesting way of navigating the kind of new reality of media, like in these days, because of course we know that the money is going out of advertising for print media. We know that there's a kind of research community in UAPs, and lots of shows like me, and much bigger shows on YouTube. Like as an example, um, Richard Dolan has been doing this for like decades. And so like real kind of UAP experts who write books and kind of proper experts in the field. Graham Randall is quite new to it, but he's got a particular way of looking at these this area through his interest in aircraft. So there's lots and lots of experts in the field here, and in a way we're kind of interested in research, but maybe some people in the field would call themselves journalists. But there is something about the question of Grush and the coverage. We spoke about this briefly before I started recording. The coverage that Grush got, and we were excited about the Guardian getting it when in the kind of UAP field when the Grush story broke. We were basically all kind of like waiting, like how's this going to go? And I think it was like 2 days later, the Guardian started reporting on it, and that seemed significant. And you have worked for the Guardian, so you know how significant it is as a newspaper. And then the Daily Mail, they've got some really good ongoing reports with Christopher Sharp writing for them, and various other colleagues of Christopher who works for the Daily Mail, which is like a massive Mail Online I think is one of the leading news websites on the planet. Massive readership. Um, and yet at the same time there are big gaps in the kind of the reporting of the Grush story. From a UK perspective, the BBC didn't report it. So that's a big one. Do you know what I mean? And various other the newspapers, generally speaking, the newspapers did, but the broadcast media didn't touch it. There were a couple of I know that a couple of podcasters, like British-based podcasters, did have interviews on local BBC radio. We've got, similar to NPR, maybe we've got like the whole country has got its own local radio for the city or whatever, like the little kind of area, and there's loads and loads of them. There's about
Mm.
50 or 40 or 50 BBC local
Mm.
radios. So they were
Yeah.
doing interviews on local radios, but it didn't really break through in the way that
Mm.
it did in the print media. So
Mm.
and obviously in the States, CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, they were interested in the story at the beginning of the year with the Chinese balloon and those other UAPs, and there still is a question mark about what those other UAPs are. And in fact, CNN, I saw something just the other day about CNN are still chasing that story, which is quite interesting. The one that came
Mm.
down over Alaska,
Yeah.
but they're not touching Grush. So
Yeah.
it's quite interesting that, I mean, what's your, like, knowing
Um,
everything you know about, your history and your work
Wait,
in,
on that. Oh, pardon me. I was going to say on that last point, it's literally because CNN put money into this Alaska venture that they're not doing other coverage of it. Like that's just how they work. And like that
right,
reporter who's probably in remote Alaska right now might be actually doing some good work on this, but it'll drop like piece every 3 weeks or month or I mean, I haven't seen their schedule and I haven't read any of their stuff. So it might be a lot less than that. But I
yeah,
think in their minds, they're like, oh yeah, we're on this story. This one person in Anchorage or no, way past Anchorage, in very remote wilderness, like, oh, they're on it. So we'll see. That's where it is intriguing because you get this. Well, for one, and this is just part of the conundrum of our era. I would argue we do have some of the best investigative journalists or journalism around that we've had around in decades, but then it gets so drowned out by cocaine at the White House. Now everyone's a cocaine expert. And so I think there's something about that schizophrenia in the American media, and like probably America's got a lot of bad exports. One of our worst exports is our media, and our model for that.
mm,
Um, so we'll see. And I think you know, that's where I'm always conflicted internally as a professor or whatever, because I'm like, there's optimism and there's pessimism. Because things like Ask a Poll, that empowers groups that are knowledgeable, energized, etc. And it lets your voices rise to the top. And I think us in the media, and again, I don't think I've said it yet, the media is a term I hate because to me it's just too broad and nebulous.
mm,
I'd rather you call out Matt Laslo. It's if I make a mistake, it's not Wired who has it out for you. It's me. I fucked up. My editor fucked up. Oh, pardon my French. Um, but yeah, we messed up, and so take that out on me, not the publication. As a general rule. And so that's where I think, especially us here in the DC Beltway, US, they call us the East Coast elites, New York City down to DC. Yeah, we've really lost touch with the people who used to read us. We can just put it that way.
mm,
Some people say middle America or flyover country, but it's no groups who used to read us no longer do. Many because they don't trust us, not just because there's all this new variety. And so that's where I think empowering the people and the citizens to engage more with the reporters, but
mm,
in a genuine way, not in superficial, Twitter likes and all that sort of way, even though I'm really good at Twitter likes. Um, and so I think things like that, again, we're stuck in this social media model where us as reporters are selling our own brands. And I don't think we can sell our brands much longer unless we show that we actually have a good product behind it.
Yeah. And just to finish off here, Matt, and thank you so much for your time. I've really,
My pleasure.
really enjoyed this conversation. Number one, and also, I really appreciate you spending time talking to me about this. To finish off, I mean, I think you're absolutely onto something about that. You know, journalists having an understanding of I mean, we were talking about Newcastle earlier, yeah. So much of UK based, like English journalism is based in London. Do you know what I mean? And of course, Newcastle has got some good local reporters, but it's so London centric. It's a joke, and I love London. I used to live in London. I really love London. I've spent most of my, the majority of my life in London, so I'm a big fan of London. Having said that, there's a kind of perspective about the other, like especially the northeast, in Newcastle, which is like, I mean, it's just nuts. You know what I mean? Like, get on the train and get up there. And or even better, don't get up on the train and get up there. Like, invest in actual journalism in the towns and the cities where people live. So there's that.
Maybe hire a Geordie.
Exactly, hire a Geordie. Exactly. But so there's that disconnect, in the media, and I think it is to do with journalists kind of reaching out, but also us non-journalists having a sense of who the good journalists are and who is actually an interesting person who kind of does excellent reporting. And there's loads and loads and loads of excellent journalists in Britain. But when it comes to this issue, this UAP issue, what advice would you give to my audience, if any? And don't want to put you on the spot here, Matt, but in terms of trying to get journalists interested in this issue.
Yeah, what's the old saying? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so you obviously don't want to come across as a troll. And it's really, if you're a regular, so at least for me personally, if you're regular in my Twitter feed, but like with some smart questions, I'll engage you. And then usually if there's good dialogues coming, then I'll follow that person so we can DM. If you really come on hot and are dominating their feed, or even, let me give this example. After my Wired magazine piece, dealing with the conspiracy Congress and looking at UAPs through that angle, some people in the UAP community were like, dude, you're a dipshit, you don't get this, you're MSM, they wrote me off. But it was interesting because I saw a few people who took the time to like kind of reel me in, like, oh, instead of me being the fisherman, they were the fishermen, and they were like, hey, good work. Even I believe one professor sent out my piece, taking out my voice completely, which was beautiful, brilliant. Would be the term. Because it wasn't beautiful, it hurt me. All my beautiful, nicely strung together words. But he was just like, look, these are the quotes he has. We've never had 6 to 7 lawmakers weigh in on this issue, let alone say this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's where you had the acute people realizing, like, hey, all right, you know, Laslo hurt me here, but instead of going for that one internet dunk or dig, um, you know, I'm gonna put him to work for me, and they have.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So that's really excellent. It's really interesting. Um, and I think that you have, I mean, your kind of recent infamy in the UAP space is like well deserved because you are getting the quotes. I mean, you're getting the quotes, man, that people are building shows around. You know what I mean? So
Well,
that's
and
really interesting.
we have the full raw interview or audio out there. The crappy thing about the U.S. Capitol is most spots you can't record video. So actually, like inside the Capitol itself,
Yeah,
there's just very few spots you can record video. People have pointed out, like, wait, after the classified briefings on like the Chinese spy balloons, they're like, look, there's all this video of that. Well, so yeah, anytime there's a classified, well, and there's a big classified briefing that's like all senators. Well, we know they're going to go 2 floors underneath the Capitol, go into the skiff, and then they'll be coming up from there. So then that's where the infotainment networks, CNN, MSNBC, Fox Newsmax, they all do what's called pooled coverage, and we get
yeah,
permission. We negotiate it, so then we can have cameras there for when they're leaving. Um, so I know these days things are more believable when it's on camera. We just can't do that because of the arcane rules of the Capitol. And we'll try to do it more when folks are outside. But for us, we're kind of realizing it's important to have that raw, uncut interview, you know, quirks and all, because it lets the community know, like, hey, this that lawmaker saying this. Um, and also, like I brought up earlier with that House Chair Oversight or House Oversight Chair James Comer. If you listen to the audio, it
yeah,
says something different than the transcript,
yeah,
you know, and
absolutely,
so he just
absolutely.
brings more life to it. And so, but also give us feedback. We've only launched a week, 10 days ago. We're about to roll out some new verticals. Um, please give us feedback because we're nothing without you.
Yeah, totally. Well, so hear that, audience, give Matt feedback and listen to his
Only
stuff.
good feedback.
All oh, yeah.
Stop saying I got an ugly haircut. I got the point already. I see you, Dad. I see you out there.
But so Matt, all of your kind of links to your website and to ask a poll and to Patreon are all in the episode description here, Matt. And I suppose the next
Awesome.
thing on your radar is basically just waiting for Congress to get up and running after their break. When are they due back?
So they'll be back this coming Monday. So
Yeah,
whichever next Monday is. Um, one thing we're gonna play with. So there's still like one interview I have with Senator Martin Heinrich from New Mexico. He is on the Senate Intelligence Committee and from New Mexico. So
interesting.
UAP country. But
Yeah,
it's a short one. And so what we're going to do, I think we're going to drop that one because it's just a quick update. But we have a longer interview I did in my Wired magazine piece with him.
hmm,
So I think I'm going to put out, and this is something I'm testing, um, especially as like we're starting a new crypto vertical. Well, right now I have a pitch out to Wired. And so what I want to do is like with my first Wired piece on UAP, I'm thinking of, hey, you guys already read that piece. Well, hey, let's test putting out those interviews, like the full raw interview that actually backed up that piece, you know, so that first piece would have just 2 quotes from Gillibrand, but not the 1 or 2 minute long interview, you know. So again, we're playing around as we go. Well, and I'm kind of intrigued on that one because I've learned so much from the UAP community since that piece came out, that I wonder if there's even things in those interviews that, you know, my ears just missed back then because I wasn't as well versed as y'all made me be.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, so there we have it then. So Matt is asking for feedback, and we've got a way of, you know, contacting, subscribing to Matt, and getting your questions asked. And listen, so just finally, I'd just love to say thank you so much, Matt, for spending the time talking to me. And it's really, you know, what you're doing is brilliant. The way you're doing it is brilliant, but what you're doing is absolutely brilliant, you know. And you know, releasing it quick. You've got a fantastic Twitter, so follow Matt on Twitter. And yeah, like, you know, all power to your elbow. You're a massive inspiration. I love the way you're innovating and you know, kind of making something happen. It's like really very, very inspiring, Matt. So, and thanks for spending the time to talk to me this afternoon for you, and this evening for me.
Thanks for staying up late with me. But really appreciate your thoughts and appreciate your inquisitive nature, especially into the media, because as a reporter, I distrust the media increasingly, and even sometimes my own pieces, you know. And so that's where, especially as a Washington D.C. Beltway creature, the more I hear from people outside of this bubble, just the better. I think lawmakers might walk away with more bruises on their hearts, but that's all I got.
Okay, man. Well, thank you ever so much.
And thank you.
So welcome now back to the archive, and here is Robert De Niro.
Sir David, I once heard you say that the giant squid was one of the few things that had been filmed, and obviously now, as you say, that's just happened. Is there is this a final frontier now for filmmakers, natural history filmmakers? Is there anywhere that they haven't been and we haven't seen?
Well, I actually believe that there is a real possibility that there might be something in the Abominable Snowman mystery.
In the where, sorry?
The Abominable Snowman mystery.
Oh, right, yeah.
There is a famous photograph of a footprint, a very big footprint, in the snow that was taken, I think, at 18,000 feet or something in the Himalayas on a snowfield in the 30s by a famous mountaineer called Eric Shipton. People are suggesting that maybe it was a folk. But nonetheless, there was a trail of these prints which went right across the snowfield and disappeared onto rocks on the other side. And I don't think you make all those jokes at 18,000 feet, you know, and there are no other footsteps near it. But perhaps even more intriguing and certainly more reliable is that in the 30s there was a German called von Königswald who was working in Hong Kong, and he went into a Chinese chemist, apothecary's shop. And there are all sorts of traditional medicines kept in those shops. And among them were some fossil teeth, or subfossil teeth. And amongst those were huge molars, about that size, about 4 or 5 times the size of our molars. And the subsequent, I mean, it had to be the molar of a giant ape. And he got about 4 or 5 of them, but the search then went on for a number of years, and eventually they found a bit of a jaw, just this lower part here, which had these teeth in, of a giant ape that would stand, if it was blown up in proportion, something like 10 feet to 12 feet tall. Immense,
Yeah.
you know? So one did exist. And it's not impossible that I mean, if people here, I dare say, who've walked in the Himalayas, if you have, you know that the distances are immense, that the rhododendron forest extends for hundreds of square miles. And you know, too, there's an animal that lives there will be well aware of your presence before you know where it is, and that it may keep out of the way. So there are persistent legends up amongst the Sherpas, like in the high mountains in the Himalayas. And I just have a suspicion there certainly was a giant ape there, and I think it's not impossible that one will survive.
So the Yeti could be hiding out somewhere.
Yeah.
So all it leaves for me to say is thank you very much for listening. And episode 61 will be just around the corner. And see you later.